Lonely ranchers save the girl thrown into the hunting camp facing the vultures. Before we dive into the story, don't forget to like the video and tell us in the comments where you're watching from. They dragged her from miles across the wasteland through dust storms that scoured her skin raw, until at last they flung her down on the border of Choctaw country, like refuse, like a carcass meant only for the circling birds that shadowed her every stumble. The desert sun had burned her into leather, her lips cracked and bleeding whenever she tried to speak. Her wrists were bound with rawhide until the fibers cut so deep into her flesh they looked more like wounds than restraints. 3 riders had claimed her as kin, called her sister, but treated her with the contempt a rancher shows a sick animal too costly to keep alive. Behind them, miles of scorched prairie and blackened timbers were all that remained of the homestead that once bore her family's name. A foreclosure notice had done what drought and hardship could not. It had reduced the Carsons to ash and bitterness. "This is where you get off," Marcus, the eldest, growled as he cut the bindings. His knife showed no mercy, only the practical thought that a corpse without rope burns might raise fewer questions. His face was carved by years of failure, his voice rough with resentment. Payment for the food you ate and the space you took while Pa was dying. Beside him, Thomas, not yet 20, spat tobacco into the red dirt. His laugh was thin, cruel, the sound of youth already hardened past repair. "The Choctaw hunt these grounds. Maybe they'll take you in. Maybe they'll let the buzzards finish you. Either way, you ain't our burden anymore." The third man, Jeremiah Walsh, was no blood at all, only debt and misfortune bound to the family name. His eyes measured her the way a banker measures collateral, cold, detached, exact. "Your pa once said you were worth more than the land. He was wrong about that, just like he was wrong about everything else. This," he gestured to the endless stretch of red earth, "this is your inheritance." She tried to stand, but her legs crumpled. 3 days of rough travel with little food or water had drained her strength. The vultures drew lower circles overhead, their shadows sliding across the ground like omens. The riders mounted again, their silhouettes black against the furnace sky. For a moment, just a moment, she thought she saw hesitation on Thomas's young face, a flicker of something human beneath the mask of hardness, but it vanished as quickly as it came. The hoofbeats faded, leaving her alone with the sound of the wind and the hiss of grit against her torn dress. She forced her swollen fingers to move, feeling blood return in painful sparks now that the rawhide was gone. Freedom had never felt so much like a death sentence. She staggered upright, swaying like a drunkard, and turned her eyes to the horizon. The red earth stretched endlessly, broken only by the jagged teeth of mesas and the thin line of mountains marking Choctaw land. Somewhere beyond that barren edge, drums whispered through the wind, steady and low, like the beating of the earth's own heart. The desert was not silent. It breathed around her in whispers and groans. The rustle of thorn bushes clawing at the wind, the sharp cry of a hawk riding a thermal, and far off the lonely howl of coyotes already calculating her odds of survival. Every sound reminded her that she was prey. She pressed a hand to her lips, felt the skin split under her touch. Each step was agony, her bare feet blistered and raw from miles of unforgiving ground. The torn hem of her dress caught on mesquite branches, leaving thin cuts that stung like fire in the dry air. She forced herself onward because standing still felt too much like surrender. The sun was sinking now, turning the horizon to molten copper. Soon the desert would change its cruelty, cold replacing heat, silence replacing the grinding wind. She knew enough of frontier life to understand. One night without fire, without water, could kill her as surely as a bullet. Her father's voice came back to her, faint as an echo across years. "The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want." He had spoken it when crops failed, when debts mounted, when hope seemed gone. She clung to the memory now, whispering hoarsely, though the words tore at her cracked throat. From the ridgeline ahead, the steady pulse of drums drifted through the air. distant, rhythmic, inhumanly patient. She froze, heart hammering. Every settler child had heard the stories. Choctaw war parties that moved like shadows. Captives who vanished into the wilderness, never to be seen again. Some tales spoke of mercy for the useful. Others told of swift, merciless justice. Her choices narrowed to two: stumble toward the sound or wander blind into the desert's endless teeth. Death was certain in one direction. In the other, there was at least the gamble of chance. She turned toward the drums. The land changed as she walked, the flat alkali giving way to broken country, gullies carved by flash floods, stone spires painted in blood red and gold by the sinking sun. Beauty that could kill a person who paused too long to admire it. At last she saw it, the glow of firelight flickering against high rock walls. Shadows moved there, figures dancing, working, gathering. Not raiders, but families. Hide shelters clustered around a central blaze. Children darting at the edges. Women sewing by firelight. Men in council with bows laid across their knees. Her breath caught. This was no ghost camp or war party, but a living settlement. And at its center sat a man whose presence seemed to anchor everything, though he did not raise his voice. His long black hair was braided with leather and feathers. His face marked not by cruelty, but by the stern calm of one who had long carried the weight of life and death for his people. A child near the fire pointed toward the rocks where she crouched. The drums ceased. Heads turned. Silence fell, deep as a canyon. She realized then that her careful approach had meant nothing. They had known she was there all along. If you found this helpful, a quick like really helps us creating. If you're still watching right now, drop a 1 in the comments. The fire at the center of the Choctaw camp crackled, sending sparks into the desert night. Shadows moved like living things against the rock walls, every face turned toward her. She had thought herself hardened to stares. Her brother's contempt had been sharp enough. But this was something different. These eyes did not despise. They measured, weighed, judged. Amelia stood with her torn dress clinging to her, rope burns raw on her wrists, dust streaking her face. She had never felt more exposed. Not one word rose from the circle of men and women, though their silence pressed heavier than any shouted curse. At the center sat the man she had glimpsed earlier, the one who seemed to anchor the camp without force. His name, spoken in hushed tones, was Yakni Deer Hunter. Broad-shouldered, with braids adorned by feathers, his presence carried the weight of command earned, not taken. He studied her with an expression carved from stone, unreadable and steady. When he finally spoke, his English was accented but precise. "You are far from white settlements. Why?" Her cracked lips formed the truth. "I was left here, cast off." Her voice trembled, but she forced it steady. "My family, they considered me a burden." A murmur rippled through the gathered people, low voices in a language she only half understood. Women exchanged glances, some shook their heads. The word burden carried across cultures, sharp and recognizable. Yakni's gaze did not soften. They brought you to Choctaw ground to die. It was not a question. This tells me much of your family, little of you. What can you offer that keeps you alive here? She swallowed against the dryness in her throat. I can sew, mend hides, gather plants for food or medicine. I can deliver children, treat wounds when no doctor is near. I can work. Many can work. His voice cut through her answer. What makes you worth more than what you consume? Her knees shook, but she lifted her chin. I don't know if I am, but I learn fast. I will not run. 20 years on a failing homestead, and I am still standing. Silence fell again. She felt the camp's eyes pressing against her skin, testing her words for weakness. Then, from the circle, an elder woman stepped forward. Her hair was long, streaked with silver, her face lined with both time and wisdom. She leaned on a carved staff, but her gaze was strong enough to silence even Yakni for a breath. Ayanna Cloudwalker. The name traveled with reverence through the gathering. She studied Amelia, then spoke in her own tongue. The words were long, deliberate, shaped by memory and tradition. Yakni listened, then turned to translate. She says the Vultures brought you here for a reason, that those thrown away by their own people sometimes become the strongest, if they survive the testing. The elder's eyes locked on hers, no pity, only challenge. Yakni rose to his feet. His shadow stretched tall across the firelight. One moon. You will remain with us for one full cycle. In that time, you must give more than you take. Fail, and the desert will claim you. The decree fell like a stone. There was no appeal, no second chance. Her throat tightened, but she forced the words past it. I accept. The fire popped, and for a moment no one moved. Then Yakni gestured toward a small shelter of hides at the edge of the camp. You sleep there. Tomorrow your testing begins. As she walked to the shelter, every step felt heavy with judgment. The people had given her no kindness, no welcome, but they had given her something more valuable, a chance. For the first time since the hoofbeats faded into the desert, she believed she might live to see another sunrise. At dawn, the camp stirred with quiet efficiency. Women prepared baskets and tools, men readied bows, children darted between tasks with an ease born of routine. Amelia emerged from her shelter stiff and sore, her every movement betraying weakness. Already she could feel eyes on her, measuring whether she belonged or not. Beside the fire stood a woman of perhaps 25, strong-boned, sharp-eyed, her dark hair bound in twin braids that framed a face unsoftened by indulgence. She spoke with Yakni briefly before turning her gaze on Amelia. This is Taloa Nighthawk, Yakni said. She leads the women's work. She will judge you. Taloa stepped closer, circling her like a hawk around prey. She touched Amelia's arm, pinched the fabric of her torn dress between two fingers, and let it drop with disdain. Clothes for parlor sitting, she said in clear English, not for survival. She produced a bundle of garments, leather leggings, a woven tunic, moccasins worn smooth from other feet. Put these on. Work naked if you prefer, but weakness disguised as modesty serves no purpose here. Amelia felt her cheeks burn. Around them, women paused in their tasks to watch. She hesitated only a moment before letting the tatters of her dress fall. The air was cool against her skin, shame prickling more sharply than the cold. She pulled on the Choctaw clothes, the leather ruff, the tunic smelling of smoke and oil. When she tied the moccasins, she realized her old identity had been stripped away as surely as her ruined dress. Taloa gave a single curt nod. Better. Now we see if you can carry life without wasting it. She led Amelia beyond the camp, across broken ridges and into a hidden canyon where water seeped from stone into a shallow basin. The spring shimmered faintly in the morning light, no larger than a man's arms could circle. Yet Taloa knelt before it with the reverence of a priestess. Water is life, she said softly. It gives what it chooses. Take too much and it disappears. Waste any and people die. Contaminate it and all die. She showed Amelia how to fill a gourd only to a carved mark, how to carry it balanced against the hip so no drop would spill. Then she handed over an empty vessel. Your turn. Show me you can be trusted. Amelia lowered the gourd into the pool, hands trembling. The water was cool, clear, a miracle in stone. She filled it carefully to the mark and lifted it, surprised by its weight. The path back was narrow, rocks loose beneath her moccasins. Halfway across a ridge she stumbled, the gourd tilting. Water sloshed dangerously near the rim. For a heartbeat she froze, staring at the shimmering surface. Failure here meant more than shame. It meant uselessness, exile, death.
Her lips cracked as she whispered a verse her father had once spoken. "When you pass through the waters, I will be with you, and through the rivers, they shall not overwhelm you." Isaiah 43:2. She steadied her grip, pressed forward, every step deliberate. When she reached the camp, not a drop had been spilled. Taloa took the gourd, inspected the level, then looked at Amelia with eyes sharp as flint. Again. 4 more times they made the journey. By the end, Amelia's arms ached, her legs shook, her palms were raw. Yet each time she returned with the water intact. Finally, Taloa gave the faintest of nods. Acceptable. It was not praise, but it was not rejection. In this place, Amelia understood that meant she had survived her first day. By the second morning, Amelia's hands were already blistered from carrying gourds. She woke aching, the sound of camp life already underway. Women calling to children, the scrape of tools, the smell of smoke. No one waited for her. Survival here meant keeping pace. Taloa Nighthawk wasted no time.
She tossed a bundle of deer hide at Amelia's feet, the stiff skin heavy with the scent of blood and earth. "Scrape it clean. If you stop, it rots. If it rots, we freeze when winter comes." Amelia stared at the hide. On the homestead, she had seen her father work leather, but never alone, never like this. She knelt, gripping the bone scraper handed to her, and began to drag it across the surface. The tool caught, jerking her hands, and the hide resisted every stroke. "You are too careful," Taloa said sharply. "You work as if mistakes can be undone. Here, mistakes kill." The words stung, but Amelia pressed harder, her arms trembling with effort. The sun rose higher, sweat running down her temples, the smell of raw flesh making her gag. By the time she had scraped one patch smooth, her shoulders burned as though fire licked her bones. She forced herself onward. Every time her movement slowed, Taloa barked, "Faster!" Every slip was met with a curt shake of the head. By midday, Amelia's palms were raw, the scraper slick with her blood. Still, she worked, because stopping meant proving her uselessness. When the hide was finally finished, she had no time to rest. A woman pressed strips of venison into her hands and showed her how to dry them with berries and fat into pemmican. Amelia tried to mimic her, mixing too much at first, earning a muttered correction. Again and again, until the mixture held together the way it was meant to. Her failures drew laughter from some of the younger women, but the elder Ayana Cloudwalker only watched, silent and thoughtful. Amelia caught her eye once and thought she saw something flicker there, not approval, but perhaps the absence of scorn. As the sun sank, Taloa placed a final test in her lap, a half-finished pair of moccasins. Sew them, strong enough for thorns, soft enough to walk miles. Amelia's fingers, swollen and cracked, struggled to push the bone needle through leather. Her stitches were uneven at first, clumsy and crooked. She remembered her mother teaching her to sew fine hems, delicate and pretty, but here beauty meant nothing. Here only strength mattered. She tore the first attempt apart, started again, slower, more deliberate. By firelight, her stitches grew steadier, ugly perhaps, but firm. When she finished, she held up the moccasin with trembling hands. Taloa turned it over, testing the seams with calloused fingers. After a long silence, she placed it down beside the fire. "It will not fall apart. For now, that is enough." Though plain, struck Amelia like an unexpected mercy. She had not been praised, but she had not been dismissed. She had given something of value, however small. That night, as she rubbed sap into her raw hands, she realized she had survived her second day. Tomorrow would bring more trials, but tonight she had not failed. And in a place where failure meant death, that was a kind of victory. On the third morning, the elder Ayana Cloudwalker beckoned Amelia away from the noise of camp. The old woman's steps were slow, but each one seemed guided by certainty. Amelia followed in silence, clutching a woven basket Taloa had thrust into her arms. They walked until the camp sounds faded, replaced by the hiss of wind through stone gullies. Ayana knelt beside a clump of gray-green leaves sprouting from dry earth. She plucked one, crushed it between her fingers, and held it to Amelia's nose. The scent was sharp, bitter, yet strangely clean. Prairie sage, Ayanna said in English softened by age. For fever, for women's pain. She dropped the crushed leaf into the basket. Remember. All morning, Ayanna moved with patient precision, revealing what Amelia's eyes had always overlooked. A willow tree clinging to a dry creek bed, its bark boiled to ease swelling. A plant with white flowers that looked harmless but could stop a heart if misused. Yucca roots that foamed into soap. Seeds that nourished, bark that healed, berries that killed. Amelia knelt beside each one, repeating their names, pressing them into her memory. Her fingers grew stained with sap, her basket heavy with roots and leaves. At one plant, Ayanna lingered, her expression grave. Its slender stalk bore blossoms pale as bone. "This one is poison," she said, "but in the smallest breath it steals pain from the dying. Medicine and death grow on the same stem. Wisdom is knowing the measure." The words lingered, heavier than the plants in Amelia's basket. She thought of her father's fever, how no doctor had come, how she had brewed herbs blindly and prayed over each bitter cup. Perhaps if she had known this wisdom then, things might have been different. Ayanna seemed to read the thought in her eyes.
White doctors trust powders and bottles made in far cities. They do not know this land, its breath, its heartbeat. Our medicine grows with us, it remembers us. For the first time, Amelia felt the sharp line between her world and theirs blur. She had grown up thinking survival was only toil, plowing fields, mending fences, stretching what little food they had. But here, survival was knowledge, passed mouth to ear, hand to hand, older than any settlement. When they returned to camp, the women gathered around to dry, grind, and store the plants. Amelia copied their motions, clumsy at first, spilling more than she kept. But Ayanna only said, "Again," and Amelia obeyed until her hands remembered the rhythm. That evening by the fire, Ayanna handed her a small pouch of dried leaves. "Tea," she said simply, "to ease your pain tonight. You worked with your body, now you work with your mind. Both must be strong." Amelia clutched the pouch as though it were treasure. For the first time, she realized she was carrying something no one could take from her, knowledge that could save a life. And as she lay on her pallet, the smoke of sage drifting through camp, she whispered words she had not spoken in years. "Heal me, O Lord, and I shall be healed. Save me, and I shall be saved, for you are my praise." Jeremiah 17:14. The hunters returned at dusk, but not with the triumph of full game. Instead, their arrival sent a shiver through the camp. 2 men carried a makeshift stretcher, and upon it lay Marley Swiftwater, young, strong, now pale as death, his leg bound in blood-soaked cloth. The camp shifted instantly from routine to urgency. Fires were stoked hotter, water boiled, tools sharpened. Voices rose, sharp and hurried, the Choctaw tongue flowing quick as the river. Children were swept away by older women, their laughter silenced by the gravity of the scene. Amelia stood frozen until Taloa's voice cut through. "You said you had treated wounds before. Prove it." Her feet moved before her mind did. She knelt beside the wounded man, peeling back the soaked cloth. What she saw made her stomach tighten. An arrow wound torn jagged through muscle, bone cracked beneath. Infection had already set in, heat radiating from the angry flesh. She drew a breath, steadying her shaking hands. This was no time for fear. She remembered her father, thrown from a horse years ago, his bone piercing the skin, how she had stitched with trembling fingers while her mother wept. He had died weeks later, but the lessons had stayed. "We need it clean," she said. Her voice surprised her, firm, commanding. Hot water, sharp blades. Ayanna handed her tools, obsidian scrapers, bone needles, antler forceps.
Primitive at first glance, yet sharp, purposeful, effective. Amelia cleaned the wound with boiled water and herbs Ayanna had pressed into her hand. Marley's jaw clenched, but he did not cry out. Sweat ran down his temples, his breath shallow, but his eyes never left hers. The arrow had left fragments of cloth and dirt. Amelia dug carefully, every movement deliberate. Each time Marley flinched, she murmured reassurance. She worked for what felt like hours, pulling filth from the torn flesh, packing herbs, suturing muscle with steady stitches. At last, she tied the final knot. The wound was still terrible, but now it was clean, contained, given a chance. She sat back, her hands trembling, blood smeared across her fingers. The fire crackled. The camp held its breath. Yachne stepped forward, his shadow falling long across the circle. He studied the wound, then Amelia. For the first time, his dark eyes softened, only a fraction, but enough for the others to see. "She has hands for healing," he said quietly. A murmur rippled through the crowd. The name passed from mouth to mouth, whispered first by a child, then by a woman. Isuba Hishi, Ridge. A name not of mockery, but of place, strength, endurance. Amelia's throat tightened. A name meant belonging. Not full acceptance, not yet, but more than she had dared to hope for. As the night deepened, she remained at Marley's side, changing poultices, keeping watch. When his fever broke near dawn, a sigh of relief passed through the camp like wind over grass. Amelia closed her eyes briefly, whispering words she had once learned at her mother's knee. "The Lord is near to the broken-hearted and saves the crushed in spirit." Psalm 34:18. The words seemed to linger, mingling with the desert night. For the first time, she felt not discarded, not forgotten, but chosen. By the time Marley's fever eased and his breathing steadied, Amelia felt the camp itself had shifted. Suspicion had not vanished, but something heavier than suspicion had lifted. She was no longer a stranger to be watched, but a presence weighed and found useful. That evening, when the hunters ate their meager meal, Amelia was invited to sit among the women. They did not crowd her, nor did they speak to her directly at first. But they allowed her space by the fire, and that was invitation enough. Children played at the edges of the firelight, carving shapes in the dust. Elders sat nearby, voices weaving stories in Choctaw tongue, their cadence rising and falling like river currents. Though Amelia could not follow the words, she recognized the rhythm of a tale passed down through generations, the pause for laughter, the solemn silence of a lesson, the murmur of agreement. Ayanna Cloudwalker leaned close and whispered the gist in broken English. Stories of the first hunters, of rivers born from tears, of the great migration west when treaties were broken. "We tell so we do not forget," she said. Amelia listened, the weight of history pressing against her chest. Her own people spoke of progress, of manifest destiny. But here around the fire she heard the cost, lives uprooted, traditions nearly lost, faith carried in silence. Later, the women began to sew by firelight, their fingers swift and sure. Taloa passed Amelia a strip of hide. "Your stitches," she said, "show me." Amelia threaded the bone needle with clumsy hands, each push straining against stiff leather. Her stitches were slow, imperfect, but they held. Taloa glanced at the work, then gave a slight nod. Better. No more was said, but the absence of criticism felt like a gift. As the fire sank lower, a young girl with braids asked shyly if Amelia knew any songs. The circle grew quiet, all eyes turning toward her. Amelia hesitated, throat dry, then began softly with the only song she had carried from childhood, a hymn her mother had sung while kneading bread. "Amazing grace, how sweet the sound." Her voice wavered, but the melody rose steady, floating above the fire. The words were strange among Choctaw ears, yet the tune carried something universal: sorrow, hope, survival. When she finished, silence held a moment longer before Ayanna murmured something low in Choctaw.
The others nodded. Later, as Amelia lay in her shelter, the night alive with drums in the distance and coyotes calling across the desert, she realized something had changed inside her. For the first time since her brothers had abandoned her, she did not feel alone. The vultures still circled above by day. The desert sun still beat mercilessly upon the land. Yet here, in this fragile circle of people bound by hardship and faith in their own endurance, she had found a family, not by blood, but by fire, work, and survival. She whispered a final prayer before sleep claimed her. God sets the lonely in families. He leads out the prisoners with singing. Psalm 68:6. The words lingered like embers, a promise that even the cast-offs could be gathered, even the abandoned could belong. If you're still watching right now, drop a 1 in the comments so I know you're still with me on this journey. The morning sun had just broken over the desert ridges when the thunder of hooves shattered the stillness. Dust rose in long plumes as a column of U.S. cavalry rode hard toward the Choctaw camp. At their head, beneath a white flag of truce that fooled no one, sat Major Jonathan Curthers of the 7th Cavalry. His blue uniform caught the light, glinting like steel against the rust-red landscape, and his presence carried with it both authority and suspicion. The Choctaw gathered quickly, weapons in hand, but lowered at Yaqui Deer Hunter's command. The chief stood tall, his war paint stark against his calm, unreadable face. He had seen truce flags before. More often than not, they were preludes to bloodshed. The major dismounted with careful precision, leather boots sinking into the dust. His men remained mounted, rifles angled, eyes sharp. This was no simple visit. It was a probe, a test of strength dressed up as diplomacy. "I seek parley with the leader of this band," Curthers declared, his voice carrying the tone of a man accustomed to instant obedience. "We come under the flag of truce, with an offer that may benefit all parties." Yaqni's eyes narrowed. "You may speak, but know this, my warriors are prepared to enforce the peace you claim." The air crackled, heavy as a storm about to break. The major opened a leather folio, pulling free papers stamped with official seals. "The United States government recognizes your sovereignty in principle, but it must also ensure the safety of settlers. There is another matter as well." His gaze swept the camp, sharp and searching, until it locked on Amelia. She froze under that look. Dust clung to her borrowed moccasins, her hair braided in Choctaw style, her skin weathered by weeks of desert sun. But to the major, she was not Ridge Nightwalker. She was Amelia Carson, missing daughter of a ruined homestead, listed on official reports as abducted by hostile tribes. Curthers' voice hardened. "We have reason to believe a white woman is held here against her will. Her brothers reported the kidnapping. Tracks led this way. I will see her with my own eyes." The Choctaw murmured, suspicion heavy in the air. All eyes turned to Amelia. In that instant, she felt the weight of 2 worlds pressing down on her shoulders. She stepped forward, her heart hammering, but her voice steady. "I am Amelia Carson," she said, the words cutting through the desert silence. "But I was not kidnapped. I was cast aside, left in the wasteland to die by the very brothers who claimed to speak for me." The major blinked, his carefully rehearsed script faltering. This was not the frightened captive he had expected, but a woman standing tall, fire in her voice. Her throat burned, but she forced the words out, remembering the verse her mother had once whispered to her in darker nights. "You will know the truth, and the truth will set you free." John 8:32. She looked the major dead in the eye. "I am free, and I choose to remain here." The desert seemed to hold its breath.
There was no turning back now. For a long moment after Amelia's declaration, silence clung to the camp like smoke. The Choctaw watched with unblinking eyes, while the cavalrymen shifted uneasily in their saddles. Major Curther's jaw tightened. This was not the testimony he had expected, nor the one his superiors wanted. "You misunderstand, Miss Carson," he said, voice smooth but brittle at the edges. "Your brothers risked their lives to bring us word of your capture. They claimed they barely escaped with their own." He held up a folded paper, an official notice bearing crude woodcut likeness of her face.
Kidnapped by hostile raiders. Reward for recovery. Amelia's stomach turned. It was her own features, twisted into propaganda, the lie that had brought this cavalry patrol crashing into her fragile new life. Yachny stepped closer, his presence a wall of calm authority. "Her words are clear," he said. "She was not taken, she was abandoned. If your government builds its judgments on lies, then it builds them on sand." The major bristled, but before he could answer, a younger soldier muttered loud enough to be heard, "Or maybe she's just been brainwashed by savages." The Choctaw warrior stiffened. Hands slid toward weapons. The air grew razor thin. Amelia's pulse thundered in her ears. "No," she shouted, stepping into the circle. "I was cast off by my kin because they saw me as a burden. That is the truth, Major. They burned the last of our home to the ground and left me for the Vultures. These people gave me shelter when I had nothing left, which sounds more like family to you." The words cut sharper than any blade. For the first time, she saw a flicker of doubt cross Curther's face. He glanced at Yachny, then at the assembled Choctaw women who stood silent but firm, their eyes reflecting painful recognition. They knew abandonment. They knew betrayal. Yachny pressed the advantage. If she were truly taken, would she not beg for return? Instead, she chooses to stand here, in front of soldiers armed to the teeth, and speak her truth. Curthers hesitated, then tried to pivot. "Whether you see it or not, Miss Carson, your presence here complicates matters. The government must know the truth, and if your family has lied—" His voice trailed off, but the implication was clear. Amelia's chest ached. She thought of Marcus's bitter sneer, Thomas's laughter like broken glass, Jeremiah's cold eyes calculating her worth in dollars. They had done this, not only abandoned her, but turned her existence into a weapon for their gain. Her voice trembled, but it did not break. "If you still believe them, Major, then summon them. Bring my brothers here. Let them speak their lies to my face. Let them say before witnesses why they left me to die." A ripple moved through the camp, part shock, part admiration. The Choctaw murmured among themselves, while Yachny's gaze softened ever so slightly. Amelia had not only defended herself, she had drawn the line in the sand. Curther snapped his folio shut. "Very well," he said grimly. "If that is your wish, then so be it. But understand, Miss Carson, truth cuts both ways. If your brothers lied, the consequences will fall not only on them, but on every settlement tied to their claim." The warning hung heavy, a promise of storms yet to break. And Amelia knew this was no longer only her trial. The fate of her people, both the blood that betrayed her and the family she had chosen, balanced on what came next. The tension from the confrontation with Major Curthers had not yet settled when the camp awoke to a darker silence the next morning. No drums, no laughter of children, only the low, grief-filled murmur of voices carrying across the fire circle. At the center lay the body of Cheeto Windwalker, one of Yachny's youngest scouts. He was just 17, strong-eyed and eager, always the first to volunteer for the long rides that kept the camp connected to the wider bands. Now he lay motionless, his lifeblood dried into the dust.
A knife jutted from his back. Its hilt bore markings none could mistake, Apache designs, yet forged from steel only available at white trading posts. Amelia's breath caught as she knelt beside him. His face was calm, almost peaceful, but the single thrust had been precise, cruelly efficient. No struggle, no warning. "He trusted his killer," she whispered, touching the dust near his hand. "This wasn't a raid. This was murder." Yachne's gaze swept the camp. Someone knew when he would leave, where he would travel, and that he carried messages. His voice was hard as flint. "This is no random killing. It is betrayal." The words rippled like a storm through the people. Suspicion lit every eye. Who had known Cheeto's route? Who had passed word to enemies? Amelia felt the stares brush her skin like nettles. She had been there when strategies were whispered over the council fire, when Marley Swiftwater's wound was dressed and plans spoken aloud. She was the outsider, the one with pale skin and a past tangled in lies. Taloa Nighthawk stepped forward, eyes sharp as obsidian. She heard the plans. She knew the times. "How do we know her brother's poison does not still run through her veins?" Amelia's throat tightened. She wanted to scream, to protest, but Yachne raised his hand before she could speak. His authority was absolute. "No one is judged without truth. We will track this betrayal to its source." Marley, still limping from his wound but unwilling to stay silent, spoke from the edge of the circle. "Look at the wound," he said, voice strained but steady. "It was done with knowledge, not the wild strike of raiders, but the hand of someone trained, someone who wanted him silent before he could cry out." Ayanna Cloudwalker bent to the ground, studying faint tracks near where Cheeto had fallen. "Boots," she murmured, "not moccasins, not Apache. White man's boots, fresh after the soldiers left." The revelation struck like thunder. Not only Apache, not only Choctaw suspicion. White hands moved through their land, unseen, guiding blades in the dark. Yachne's jaw tightened. "This is bigger than one boy, bigger than this camp. Someone wants us broken from within. They want the white soldiers to see treachery in our eyes, so war becomes inevitable." Amelia's heart pounded. "Railroad corporations," her mind whispered. The whispers she'd heard as a child, of tracks that would cut the land, of deals made in shadows. Could this be the hand behind the blood? She lifted her gaze to Yachne's. "Then we must find proof," she said, her voice raw but certain. "If we cannot uncover who benefits from this death, they will use it to destroy us all." Yachne studied her for a long moment. Then he nodded once, grim and resolute. The hunt for the truth had begun. The council fire burned low, its embers glowing like watchful eyes. Around it, only a handful remained. Yachne Deerhunter, Ayanna Cloudwalker, Taloa Nighthawk, Marley Swiftwater, and Amelia. The rest of the camp waited in silence, every ear straining for the decision that would shape their fate. "The boy's blood cries for justice," Taloa said, her voice sharp as steel. "But vengeance without proof will only feed the soldiers' lies. We must strike with knowledge, not anger." Yachne nodded. "There is one place where the truth may live. The old trading post in the Box Canyon. Apache ride there, Mexican merchants meet there, and I have heard whispers that white officers sit at their tables." His gaze swept the circle. "If this death is tied to a larger hand, the proof will be found in that place." A cold hush fell. Everyone knew the canyon. Its single entrance made it easy to defend, impossible to storm. A fortress of stone, where enemies could see an intruder long before they arrived. Marley leaned on his staff, his wounded leg trembling but his spirit unbroken. "I have seen their fires," he said. "They guarded like a fort. Yet if we do not go, we remain blind. If we are blind, we are already dead." Ayanna's weathered face turned to Amelia.
"This is no test for a girl abandoned in the desert," she said quietly. "If you ride as one of us." Amelia swallowed hard. Every part of her ached from the month of proving, but something deeper had shifted inside her. She thought of Chito's still form, of his trust betrayed. She thought of her brothers leaving her for the Vultures. And she thought of a verse her father had whispered when debts closed in. "For God has not given us a spirit of fear, but of power, love, and self-control." "I will go," she said, surprising herself with the steadiness of her voice. "Not because I seek vengeance."
"Because I cannot bear to see another innocent thrown away like spoiled meat." Yachne's eyes, dark as obsidian, lingered on her. Then he gave a single nod. "So be it. We ride at dawn." The morning came cold, the desert sky pale with first light. Their band was small, Yachne leading with silent authority, Marley hobbling but determined, Taloa sharp-eyed as a hawk, Ayana for wisdom, and Amelia, bearing a knife once belonging to Yachne's fallen sister, its obsidian edge gleaming like frozen night. They moved like shadows across the wasteland, avoiding open ground, following gullies and broken ridges until the canyon mouth loomed ahead. Smoke curled into the sky, carrying the scent of coffee and grease, white men's provisions. Amelia peered through the spyglass Yachne handed her. What she saw made her stomach twist. Soldiers in blue coats, Mexican traders with ledgers, Apache warriors with painted faces, all gathered under one roof. Maps spread across tables, gold exchanged in open daylight. War was not a clash of tribes and settlers. It was a business, orchestrated by men in comfort while others bled in the dust. Yachne lowered his voice, each word heavy with resolve.
"Tonight we take their secrets, not their lives. The truth must speak louder than our rage." Amelia's fingers tightened on the obsidian knife. The desert wind stung her face, but inside her, fire burned. She was no longer the girl left to die. She was part of the hunt for truth, and the night ahead promised no mercy. Night draped the canyon in silver shadows. The firelight from the trading post spilled against the stone walls, flickering like a warning beacon. Amelia crouched low beside Yachne, her heart thundering in her chest. Every instinct screamed at her to run, but the weight of the obsidian knife at her side reminded her she had chosen this path. "They guard the canyon mouth," Marley whispered, his voice taut with pain from his still healing leg. "2 soldiers, 1 Apache scout, more watch from the walls." Yachne studied the patterns of the sentries with eyes sharpened by years of hunting. "They are confident," he murmured. "Confident men grow careless." He traced lines in the dirt, paths of shadow, routes of escape. Each movement was spare, efficient, deliberate. Taloa touched Amelia's arm. "Stay close. Do not speak unless death demands it." The group moved. Silent as smoke, they slipped along the canyon's edge, pressed against rock walls where shadows gathered deepest. Amelia's breath came shallow, each step measured, her senses sharpened to the rustle of leather, the scrape of boot on stone. Through a crack in the trading post wall, she saw what no frontier tale had ever prepared her for. Inside, soldiers sat with Mexican merchants and Apache chiefs, their voices low but fierce as they traced supply lines on maps. Gold coins clinked onto the table, whiskey sloshed in tin cups. Amelia's gaze fixed on the parchment stretched across the table. She read the English words scrawled in ink: railroad expansion routes. Dozens of red lines slashed through Choctaw lands, Apache hunting grounds, and settlements alike. The wars were no accident. They were investments. Blood bought steel. Yachne's hand pressed lightly on her shoulder, steadying her. His eyes told her what words could not: remember everything. With trembling fingers, Amelia pulled the thin sheet of paper Ayana had given her, animal hide parchment treated with smoke to hold charcoal.
By the dim glow, she copied lines, symbols, and names with quick, careful strokes. Each mark was a dagger of truth aimed at powerful men. Then came the sound that froze her blood. A boot scuffed against gravel. A lantern swung. A soldier stepped outside, his gaze sweeping the shadows. His eyes narrowed, lingering on the dark cleft where Amelia knelt. Yakni moved like a panther, a hand gripping her wrist before she could flinch. The soldier turned his head, frowning, then barked a command in Spanish. Torches flared. The camp stirred. "They know," Marley hissed. "Run," Yakni ordered. The canyon erupted in chaos. Shouts rose, rifles clattered, dogs barked, their howls tearing through the night. Amelia sprinted, her legs burning, the stolen copy clutched against her chest. Behind her, the echo of hoofbeats thundered as mounted scouts poured from the post. Bullets sparked against stone. The desert opened before them, vast, merciless, offering no cover but the jagged bones of the land. As Amelia stumbled over loose rock, her father's words surged unbidden through her fear. "When you pass through the waters, I will be with you, and through the rivers they shall not overwhelm you." But tonight it was not rivers, it was fire and lead.
And survival meant outrunning death itself. The desert became a battlefield of shadows and dust. Hoofbeats thundered behind them, echoing like war drums, each one closing the gap between life and death. Amelia's lungs burned, her legs raw from stone and thorn, but the bundle of copied documents stayed pressed to her chest as if it were her own heartbeat. "South Ridge," Yakni barked, leading them toward a jagged cut in the earth where boulders offered cover. "Move or die." Gunfire cracked through the night. Sparks sprayed off stone as bullets ricocheted past Amelia's head. Marley staggered, nearly falling, his wounded leg faltering under the strain. Amelia darted to his side, slipping an arm under his shoulder. "You won't fall here," she hissed, half dragging him forward. The group reached the ridge and scrambled down the loose shale. A moonless darkness swallowed them, broken only by the glow of lanterns and torches flaring behind the pursuers. Yakni halted at the base, chest heaving, eyes scanning the stars. "They will not stop. We must reach Curthers before dawn." Amelia looked back. She could see the soldier silhouettes cresting the ridge, rifles gleaming in torchlight. There would be no hiding, no more running. They had reached the point of no return. Hours later, with the first light bleeding across the horizon, the weary band stumbled into the clearing near Fort Gaines. Amelia's heart lurched. Blue uniforms dotted the landscape. U.S. cavalry patrols mounted and armed, rifles ready. "Hold!" a soldier shouted. Dozens of weapons leveled at them. Major Jonathan Curthers stepped forward, his jaw tight, his gaze wary. "So, the Choctaw bring fire into my camp before sunrise, and the woman I was ordered to rescue stands with them. Explain yourself, quickly." Amelia's voice was raw but steady. She held the bundle high, the documents smudged with charcoal and sweat. "Because if you don't hear us out, Major, you'll be dead before the week ends." Curthers' eyes flicked to the bundle. A flicker of doubt cracked his stern facade. He gestured sharply. "Bring them here." The camp fell silent as Amelia spread the copies across a rough-hewn table. The maps, contracts, and coded orders told their story more brutally than any words could. Railroad routes slicing through native lands. Payments to officers.
Lists of planned raids disguised as Indian hostilities. And there, letters signed by his own intelligence officer. Curthers' face hardened as he read, the color draining. "Lieutenant Morrison," he muttered, the name tasting of betrayal. His fists clenched, knuckles white. "He sold us, sold our men for railroad gold." Yakni's voice was steady, sharp as flint. "You see now. This war is not ours, not Choctaw, not Apache. It is bought and paid for by men who value steel and profit over life."
The Major closed his eyes briefly. When he opened them, the weight of command sat heavy in his gaze. But also something else. Conviction. If this is true, then I have been fighting the wrong enemy. He looked at Amelia. And you, why stand with them instead of your own blood? Her reply cut like steel. Because the truth matters more than blood. And the truth is here, Major. You will know the truth, and the truth will set you free. For a long moment, the camp held its breath. Then Curthers tore the insignia from his coat, slamming it onto the table. Lieutenant Morrison will hang, and by God, we'll drag this corruption into the light. In that instant, an unlikely alliance was born, Choctaw warriors at an honest U.S. officer, standing together against the web of greed threatening to consume them all. The desert wind shifted, carrying away the last echo of pursuit. The battle was not over, but for the first time, Amelia knew which side of history she belonged to. If you like this video, please comment number 9. If you don't like it, please comment number 0. Dawn spread across the desert like a slow-burning fire, painting the sky with shades of crimson and gold. The air was heavy with dust and exhaustion, but for the first time in weeks, Amelia felt something she had nearly forgotten: relief. The chase was over, the truth was out. And yet, the consequences had only just begun. Inside Fort Gaines, soldiers whispered among themselves, glancing between the Choctaw warriors and their own commander. Tension simmered, but the powder keg of violence had been diffused by evidence too damning to ignore. On a wooden post near the parade ground, Lieutenant Morrison stood bound in chains, his face pale with fury. He spat curses, calling them liars, traitors, fabricators. But the papers spread across Major Curthers' desk were undeniable. Curthers had not slept. His eyes were bloodshot, his uniform disheveled, but his authority had only grown sharper in the week of revelation. "He'll face a military tribunal," the Major announced to his officers, "and so will any man in this command who took blood money from railroad men. We swore an oath to this flag, not to their gold." The officers exchanged uneasy looks. Some nodded firmly, others kept their silence. Amelia saw in their faces the cracks of doubt and the shadows of guilt. Not every man here could be trusted. The web of betrayal reached deeper than Morrison alone. Outside, Amelia sat on a barrel near the corral, the desert wind tugging at her borrowed moccasins and the Choctaw tunic she now wore as naturally as her own skin. The world she had been born into, the homestead, her father's debts, the chains of blood loyalty, felt like a distant echo. She thought of her brothers, their cruelty, the way they had abandoned her to die. By now, they were likely spending reward money earned on lies, never expecting her to stand again in the light of truth. Ayanna Cloudwalker's voice came to her memory, low and steady like the heartbeat of the earth. "Sometimes the vultures bring us to the place we were always meant to be." Amelia looked up at the rising sun and wondered if that was true. Perhaps being thrown away had been the only path to finding where she belonged. Yachni approached, his presence as solid as the desert rock. He carried himself with the calm of a man who had faced storms before and knew more would come. "The Major believes you," he said simply. Amelia nodded, her throat tight. "Will that be enough?" His eyes searched the horizon where the mountains bled into sky. "Enough to stop one battle, not enough to end the war. Man with gold and power will not yield because one officer grows a conscience. They will come again, in different forms, with different names." She felt the weight of his words settle into her bones. Then why fight at all? Yachni's gaze softened, and for the first time, Amelia saw something almost tender in his eyes. "Because our children must know we tried. Because if we do not fight, they inherit only chains." He turned his face to the sun. Your brothers thought you weak. The desert thought you finished, yet here you stand, alive, with the truth in your hands. That is not weakness, Amelia. That is strength." Her eyes stung, though she refused to let the tears fall. She whispered, almost to herself, "I don't know what I am anymore. White? Choctaw? A stranger to both?" Yachni shook his head. "You are what you choose to be. Blood does not bind you. Actions do." At that moment, Major Curthers strode from his quarters, his voice carrying the weight of command. "The tribunal will convene at once, and I will ride to Washington with this evidence if I must drag it in my own hands." He looked directly at Amelia. "You've given us more than documents. You've given us a chance to set this right." Amelia rose to her feet, squaring her shoulders against the dawn. She felt the eyes of both soldiers and Choctaw upon her, two worlds colliding in her very being. For the first time, she did not shrink from their judgment. Perhaps Yachni was right. She was not weak, not abandoned, not a burden. She was a bridge, and bridges, though trampled by many, carried the weight that connected worlds. The days that followed blurred into a strange rhythm, half military tribunal, half sacred council. Soldiers in blue uniforms sat across from Choctaw elders beneath the same roof, their words translated, measured, sometimes tense, but always heard. For the first time in memory, enemies were speaking as equals. Amelia watched from the edges, called upon only when her testimony was needed. She spoke of the desert, of betrayal, of the night she stitched life back into Marley Swiftwater's leg. Her voice did not tremble. She told the truth as she had lived it, and when her words faltered, she remembered the verse Ayanna had whispered to her when the trial began. "The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it." John 1:5. The tribunal's verdict was swift. Morrison was guilty, stripped of his rank, and sent under guard to face justice in Washington. Yet Amelia knew justice on paper was fragile. The men who had financed betrayal, the railroad tycoons, the merchants, were still out there, cloaked in wealth. The battle ahead was not fought with rifles, but with endurance, alliances, and truth. That night, the Choctaw broke bread with the soldiers. It was a meal of venison stew and hardtack, bitter coffee, and wild herbs. Around the fire, children's laughter mingled with the wary chuckles of men who had once hunted each other. Amelia sat between worlds, listening, absorbing, her heart heavy and light at the same time. Later, Ayanna Cloudwalker beckoned her away from the fire. They walked to the edge of camp where the desert stretched wide under starlight. The elder's steps were slow, her braids silver in the moonlight. She placed a hand on Amelia's arm. "You came to us broken," Ayanna said softly, "and now you stand unbroken. Do you see what has happened?" Amelia swallowed. "I see that I've changed, but I don't know who I am." Ayanna's eyes gleamed with wisdom. "You are not who your brother said you were. You are not what the world tried to throw away. You are what the Creator has shaped from the fire of trial, clay in His hands." Amelia thought of the vultures that had circled above her when she lay half dead in the dust. She thought of the drums, the firelight, the moment Yachni's eyes had judged her and not found her wanting. And she thought of the cross her mother once kept beside her bed, a symbol she had nearly forgotten until the wilderness carved its meaning back into her soul. She whispered, more prayer than statement, "The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil." Psalm 23. Ayanna nodded as though she had heard the words before Amelia spoke them. "Yes, even here, in this valley, He has walked with you." At dawn, Amelia stood before both camps. Yachni on one side, Major Curthers on the other. The people watched in silence, waiting. She drew a deep breath. "I was cast out by my own blood," she said, her voice steady. "But I have been given new family, not by birth, but by choice.
I choose to remain here, to work, to serve, to build a bridge between our worlds. If we do not hold together, others will profit from our divisions. But if we walk side by side, perhaps the desert will bloom with peace." The words were met with silence, then the slow beat of a Choctaw drum. One, then another, then joined by the steady clap of soldiers' hands. Not loud, not triumphant, but steady, like the pulse of something new being born.
Yakni stepped forward, placing in Amelia's hands the obsidian knife that had once belonged to his sister. "You are Ridge Nightwalker now," he said, "daughter of two worlds. Walk in truth, and the truth will walk with you." Tears blurred her vision as the camp broke into song, an old Choctaw chant blending with the faint hum of a hymn Amelia herself began. Two melodies, different yet not discordant, carried on the wind. And as the vultures wheeled high above, no longer waiting for her to die, but circling as witnesses to her rebirth, Amelia knew she had not just survived. She had become a living testimony that even in betrayal, even in wilderness, God could carve a path to belonging. And maybe, as you listened, you remembered your own journey, how life tested you, how family sometimes failed you, and yet how faith or kindness from strangers carried you through. Stories like Amelia's are not just about the frontier. They are about all of us, trying to find a place where we are seen, valued, and called by a name that means more than survival. The desert, the drums, the broken homestead, they echo the struggles and hopes of generations before us.
That's why these true Wild West stories reach so deep. They remind us of sacrifice, of redemption, and of the God who never leaves us, even in the valley of shadows. If this story stirred something in your heart, don't let it fade. Subscribe, share it with someone who needs hope, and stay with us for the next journey into the untold pages of the Wild West.